Hello everyone. Does this sound familiar to you? Wherein you are trying to read and learn something, you open your book, you're on page 26 maybe, reading something, learning something, you feel you are learning, your mom feels you are learning, but you in fact are not learning anything, you're just daydreaming. You just stick your eyes on that page and you're just lost. Well, it's very common. Everybody of us have faced something like this in our life. But something about memory that has been asked a lot to me, I'd like to share a few hands-on tips that you can use to focus on how can we encode any piece of information smoothly, nicely, effectively. So there are 3 stages of memory: encoding, storage, retrieval. Encoding is like putting a piece of information in your head. Storage is trying to keep it intact till the time you can retrieve it, which means trying to recall it. So one night prior to exam, what you're doing is you're encoding everything. You're just trying to make sure that you're reading and learning, and be it notes, be it somebody else's notes, or anything that comes across you, you try to grab everything, learn everything. That's encoding. So we do have research and everything supporting how can we improve storage and everything, but one thing for sure is, instead of working on retrieval or working on storage, how about we focus on the process of encoding information? How better and effectively can we encode those information? Like the first one to this is know yourself better and know your style. Style means, do you have a visual style or an auditory or maybe kinesthetic learning style? What's your learning style? Like for example, I have students who come to me and say, I don't remember the answer, but I do remember that it is somewhere on the right side of the page, somewhere down there. There's a diagram out there, there's a pie chart here, there is this, that, it's a blue color book, it's a green color book. So you remember everything but the answer. So that's visual memory. People like this need to actually read the book because they can relate to the positioning of the paragraph, to the positioning of the information, and they can relate the learning material. On the other hand, about the auditory learners, if you're an auditory learner, your general tendency would be to not open the book and read it completely, but to catch hold of people who have been reading properly, and you'll just ask them, प्लीज़ बता दो क्या पढ़ना है, ये चैप्टर में है क्या, समझा दे, जिस्ट में बता दो, शॉर्ट में बता दे, right? Or maybe you will just have an access to your long-term memory and think about what the teacher must have taught in the class. If you can remember those things from your long-term memory, you'll be able to write it properly if it's auditory learner. And kinesthetic, last but not the least, kinesthetic are people who can feel a lot. They depend on the touch, the feel of things. So, there are people who need to make notes. So, even if they study together, they'll go home, they'll make notes. There are times when they don't even read the notes that they are making, but still, the act of making notes, that in itself is a satisfaction for them. They'll feel that, okay, now I'll remember things. Why? Because I've written them on my own. So, auditory, kinesthetic, and visual learner. Know your style first. What are you good at? Apart from this, there are a few hands-on techniques that will help you to remember the piece of information really well and effectively. Let's focus on them. So the first is mnemonics. Mnemonics is if you could, just make some acronyms. If there is a big answer, just take the first alphabet or the key points and some key words and try to make a small acronym out of it called as mnemonics. Like for example, Vibgyor for the colors of rainbow. The next is memory peg. Memory peg is when you can actually try and make association between the learning material and something that's very rhyming to it. So like 1, 2, buckle my shoe or something like that. But it's more of, you make certain pegs, certain shortcuts to remember that piece of information. So that's memory peg. Alright, so the next one is the stories that you can tell yourself. Stories like, Gandhi ji first came, then he did this, then in this year he did this, something like that. If we can make stories right from the evolution to chemistry to physics, just try and put life in all the answers. So that those are characters that are playing, and if you can put life, that can act as a story for you, you'll remember it better. color can help. If you can color certain things in red, in blue, in green, you will remember things that you have painted red in color together. It's also the way you perceive. Okay, it's perception. It's a principle of similarity, that if you color some points in red, you'll be able to remember it together. So those are certain principles that you can use. Also repetitions. The more repetition we have, the better learning can become. So it's like दो बूंद जिंदगी के, किसका tagline है? Or maybe अगर कुछ अच्छा होता है तो दाग अच्छे है. Whose tagline is this? Or maybe be vibrant. Whose tagline is this? So you will remember things if you repeatedly come across them. The next one is loci method. Loci, which means location. Sometimes what happens is you remember something depending on the location of where you were learning that material. So while the encoding was taking place, what and where were you sitting? So this is how we can actually try and associate a place with the learning material. So that's loci method. And the last but not the least, chunking method. Chunk it into pieces. Don't try and sit and read all the material at one stretch. Just chunk it. Try to chunk it into different pieces. Like try and remember this. You know, our short-term memory can have the capacity just to fit in 5 to 9 items. But we still end up remembering a phone number of 10 digits very smoothly. How is that possible? Because we chunk it. Also, please remember, there is nothing more than willingness to learn and interest to learn. If you are interested in something, if you want to learn something, you will definitely learn it. So be it answers or learning or exams or anything, it's just part of life. It's not life or death. So relax. Thank you so much.